Before I start, I want to be clear about one thing. This story is not about strict parenting. It is not about different opinions on discipline. It is about an adult crossing a line with a child and believing no one would ever prove it. Before we begin, take a moment. Tell me where you're listening from and how much battery your phone has right now. My name is Laura Bennett. I am a mother. And the day my aunt locked my child in a room to teach discipline, she thought it would stay a family secret. It was a normal family gathering. People were talking, eating, laughing. My child was playing nearby with cousins. I remember checking on them a few times, feeling relieved that everything seemed fine. Then I noticed something was wrong. My child wasn't where I had last seen them. At first, I wasn't worried. Kids move around, they get distracted. I walked through the house and called their name. No answer. I asked my aunt if she had seen my child. She said, calmly, "They're fine." That answer didn't sit right with me. I asked again, more directly. She sighed and said, "They're in timeout. They need to learn discipline." My heart dropped. I asked where. She pointed down the hallway. I walked there quickly and tried the door. It was locked. I knocked and called my child's name. I could hear crying on the other side. Panicked. Confused crying that every parent recognizes instantly. I turned back to my aunt and demanded she open the door. She didn't rush. She didn't look concerned. "They need to calm down," she said. "This is how kids learn." I told her she had no right to do this. I told her to unlock the door immediately. That's when other family members stepped in, not to help my child, but to tell me I was overreacting. "She's older. She knows what she's doing. It's just discipline. You're being too sensitive." No one asked how long my child had been in there. No one asked if they were scared. When the door finally opened and my child ran into my arms, shaking and crying, something inside me hardened. This was not a misunderstanding. This was control. And while everyone was busy telling me to calm down, my aunt made one mistake she didn't realize would matter. She forgot about the camera. After I held my child, the room went quiet in a way that felt heavy, not concerned. My aunt crossed her arms and looked at me like I had embarrassed her. She didn't ask if my child was okay. She didn't apologize. She explained herself. "They were being disrespectful," she said. "I gave them time to think. That's discipline." I told her she had no right to lock a child in a room. I told her she was not the parent. She waved her hand like I was missing the point. "You're too soft," she replied. "Kids need structure. Someone has to teach them." Other relatives started talking then, not to protect my child, but to calm me down. "She didn't mean any harm. You're making a big deal out of nothing. That's how we were raised, and we turned out fine." I looked at my child, who was still shaking in my arms, trying to catch their breath. "This isn't nothing," I said. "They were locked in." My aunt rolled her eyes. "For a few minutes, you're acting like I hurt them." That sentence stayed with me, not because it was true, but because of how easily she said it. I asked how long my child had been in that room. She didn't answer right away. That silence told me more than any explanation could. I realized then that this wasn't a one-time decision made in the moment. This was something she believed in, something she felt entitled to do. I asked one more question. "Have you done this before?" Her face changed slightly. Not guilt, annoyance. "They're not the only child who needs discipline," she said. My stomach tightened. That was when I stopped arguing. I knew something important in that moment. I was not going to convince her. And I was not going to convince the people defending her either. They were more concerned with keeping the gathering comfortable than with facing what had just happened. I took my child to a quiet room and sat with them until they calmed down. I listened as they tried to explain through tears that the door wouldn't open and they didn't know why they were being punished. I promised them they hadn't done anything wrong. While I was doing that, my aunt was in the other room, talking. I could hear her voice rise and fall as she told her version of the story. In her version, she was the responsible adult. I was the emotional one. That's when I remembered the camera. It wasn't hidden for secrets. It was there because of past family issues. Because trust had already been a problem long before that day. Most people forgot it existed. Including her. I didn't say anything out loud. I didn't accuse her again. I didn't threaten. I checked my phone. The footage was there. Clear, time-stamped, unedited. It showed my child being led down the hallway. It showed the door being closed. It showed my aunt turning the lock and walking away without looking back. No yelling, no chaos. Just a choice. My hands were steady when I saved the clip. Because at that point, this was no longer about family opinions. It was about facts. And my aunt was still laughing in the other room, convinced this would blow over like every other time. She didn't know yet that the story she was telling was already over. I waited until my child was calm before I looked at the video again. I didn't want anger to guide what I did next. I wanted certainty. The footage didn't show chaos. That was what made it so clear. It showed my aunt taking my child by the arm and leading them down the hallway. It showed her stopping at the door, saying something I couldn't hear, and closing it behind them. Then it showed her turning the lock and walking away like this was routine. No hesitation, no concern, no second thought. The timestamp told me how long my child had been in there, longer than anyone admitted. I felt something settle in my chest, heavy, but steady. This was not a misunderstanding. This was not discipline gone wrong. This was an adult deciding she had authority over a child who was not hers. I went back into the living room and asked her one last time to apologize. She laughed and said, "For what?" I told her there was footage. Her smile faltered, just for a moment. What footage? I didn't raise my voice. I didn't threaten her. I simply told her the house had cameras and that what happened had been recorded. She looked around the room like she was suddenly seeing it for the first time. Then she said something that told me everything. "Those cameras don't save anything," she said quickly. "They overwrite." That was when I knew she had thought about this before. I told her the video was already saved. The room changed after that. People stopped defending her and started watching her. My aunt's voice rose as she insisted it was being taken out of context. She said the camera didn't show the whole story. She said anyone could make a clip look bad. I didn't argue. I didn't need to. She tried to grab my phone. I stepped back. "Give me that," she said. "This is private family business." I told her she had no right to touch me or my phone. I told her the moment she locked that door, it stopped being private. She told me I was threatening the family. She said I was cruel for even thinking about using the footage. That was when I said the words she didn't expect. "I'm protecting my child." Her face hardened. "You're ruining everything," she said. I looked at my child, sitting quietly beside me, holding my hand too tightly. "No," I replied. "You already did." She left the room and went down the hallway. I followed, not to stop her, but to see what she would do. She went straight for the camera system. She tried to delete the footage. Her hands shook as she pressed buttons, scrolling too fast, panicking now. She asked who else had access. She demanded passwords. She told me to turn it off. It was already backed up. I told her that. She stopped and stared at me, finally understanding what she had lost. Control. The rest of the family stood in the doorway, silent. No one stepped in to help her this time. No one told me I was overreacting anymore, because now there was proof. And proof does not care who you are related to. She called it discipline. The footage called it something else. When my aunt realized she couldn't delete the footage, her tone changed. She stopped arguing about discipline and started talking about family. She said mistakes happen. She said I was taking things too far. She said we could talk about this later, privately. When emotions had cooled down, I told her no. I told her there was nothing left to talk about. That was when she tried something else. She turned to the rest of the family and said I was overreacting because I was tired, because parenting is stressful, because I had always been too sensitive. She asked them to convince me to drop it before I destroyed relationships that couldn't be fixed. A few people looked uncomfortable. A few stayed silent. No one defended what she had done, but no one apologized either. I realized then that she wasn't afraid of what she'd done to my child. She was afraid of losing control of the story. She kept asking where the video was saved. She wanted to know who could see it. She said she needed to make sure it didn't get misunderstood. I told her it was already backed up and time-stamped. That was the moment she stopped pretending. Her voice went cold. She told me I was ungrateful. She said she had helped raise children long before I became a parent. She said I had no right to question her methods in her own family. I told her she lost that right the moment she locked a door on my child. She stepped closer to me then, lowering her voice. She said if I took this any further, I would regret it. She said no one would forgive me for involving outsiders. I looked at my child. They were sitting quietly, watching us, clearly confused and still scared. They didn't understand why the adults were arguing, but they understood enough to know something was wrong. That was when my decision became very clear. I told my aunt I was leaving. She laughed and said, "And do what? Call the police over a timeout?" I didn't answer her. I picked up my child, grabbed my bag, and walked toward the door. She followed me, still talking, still trying to scare me back into silence. She said I was dramatic. She said I was ruining the family. She said no one would take me seriously. Outside, I stopped and turned back to her. "I'm not doing this to punish you," I said. "I'm doing this to protect my child." Her face tightened, and for the first time, she didn't have a response ready. I got in the car and locked the doors. Only then did my hands start shaking. I called the police. I didn't yell. I didn't exaggerate. I explained exactly what had happened and told them there was video evidence. The person on the phone asked calm, clear questions and told me to stay where I was. When the officers arrived, my aunt was still inside the house, pacing. I could see her through the window, already rehearsing another version of the story. But this time, the story wasn't hers to tell, because this time there was footage, and footage doesn't forget, doesn't soften, and doesn't care about family titles. It only shows what happened. The officers listened first. They didn't rush me, and they didn't interrupt. They asked what happened, who was involved, and where my child was now. I told them everything in the same order it happened, keeping my voice steady because I didn't want emotion to blur the facts. Then I showed them the footage. They watched quietly. One of them asked me to pause it and rewind. He noted the timestamp and how long the door stayed locked. He asked who had access to the camera system and whether the video had been altered. It hadn't. When they went inside to speak with my aunt, her confidence was gone. She started the way I expected. She said she was only trying to teach discipline. She said children sometimes exaggerate. She said she had raised kids before and knew what she was doing. One of the officers asked a simple question. "Are you the child's legal guardian?" She said no. "Did you have permission from the parent to lock the child in a room?" She hesitated, then said she didn't think she needed it. The officer explained calmly that locking a child in a room as punishment, without parental consent, could be considered abuse. He explained that intent did not erase impact, and discipline did not include confinement. My aunt's voice got louder. She said I was turning the family against her. She said I was using the police to threaten her. She said I was overreacting because I was embarrassed. The officer stopped her. "This isn't about family conflict," he said. "This is about a child." That sentence changed the room. The rest of the family stood back, quiet now. No one jumped in to defend her. No one tried to explain it away anymore. The moment proof entered the conversation, opinions stopped mattering. The officers told her there would be a report. They explained that child services would be notified and that the footage would be attached as evidence. They explained what would happen next and what contact with my child would look like going forward. My aunt finally looked at me. Not angry, afraid. She asked me if I really wanted to do this. She said we could still handle it privately. She promised it would never happen again. I didn't answer her, because the time for promises had passed. I looked at my child instead. They were holding my hand, quieter than usual, watching everything with tired eyes. In that moment, I knew I would make the same decision every single time. The officers left after giving me a case number and instructions. They told me I did the right thing. They told me to call if there was any further contact or pressure. When the door closed behind them, the house felt different. Heavier, honest. My aunt didn't speak to me again that day. She avoided my eyes, gathering her things, already rewriting the story in her head. I didn't follow her. I didn't need closure from her. I had proof. I took my child home that night and sat with them until they fell asleep. I told them they were not in trouble. I told them no one had the right to lock them away. I told them I would always come for them. And I meant it. That gathering ended something important. Not just my relationship with my aunt, but the idea that family excuses harm if you keep it quiet. She called it discipline. The law called it something else. And my child slept safely because the truth was recorded before it could be erased. The days that followed were quieter, but heavier. Family members started calling, not to ask how my child was doing, but to ask what I planned to do next. Some said they understood. Others said I had gone too far. A few told me I should have handled it privately, that involving the police would damage relationships forever. I listened without arguing, because something had already changed inside me. Before that day, I might have tried to explain myself. I might have tried to make them see how frightened my child had been, how wrong it felt to hear crying behind a locked door. This time, I didn't. I simply said, "My child is safe now." That answer made some people uncomfortable. It forced them to face what they were trying to avoid. A few stopped calling after that. Child services followed up exactly as the officers said they would. They asked questions, reviewed the footage, and spoke to my child in a calm, careful way. No one blamed them. No one suggested they had deserved it. Watching that process was painful, but it was also validating. For the first time, adults were centering my child instead of the adult who hurt them. My aunt tried to contact me once. She sent a message saying she never meant any harm and that I had misunderstood her intentions. She said she was sorry things had gone this far. She asked if we could talk without involving anyone else. I didn't respond, not because I wanted to punish her, but because I understood something clearly now. An apology that only appears after consequences is not about regret. It is about control. I blocked her number. That decision caused another wave of backlash. Some relatives accused me of breaking the family apart. They said children need discipline and that I was raising mine to be weak. They said I was dramatic and vindictive. None of them mentioned the locked door. None of them mentioned the footage. That told me everything I needed to know. At home, my child slowly returned to themselves. The nightmares stopped. The questions became less frequent. One night, while I was tucking them in, they asked if anyone could ever lock them in a room again. I told them no. I told them that no one ever has the right to scare them like that. No matter who they are, saying it out loud felt powerful. I set new rules after that. Clear ones. My child would never be left alone with certain people again. Family gatherings would only happen on my terms. Or not at all. Anyone who questioned those boundaries did not get access to us. Some relationships faded. Others ended completely. What remained was smaller, but it was safer. I learned something important through all of this. People will defend harm if admitting it means facing their own silence. They will call it discipline, tradition, or misunderstanding. They will pressure you to stay quiet so they don't have to change. But children don't need families that look peaceful. They need families that protect them. My aunt believed she could erase what she did. She believed it would stay a private moment, softened by excuses and forgotten over time. She was wrong, because the footage existed, because I chose my child over comfort, and because once the truth is recorded, it no longer depends on anyone's permission. She called it discipline. I called it the line that could never be crossed again, Time did what arguments never could. It made things clear. Weeks passed. Then months. The anger from relatives faded into distance. Some people stopped reaching out entirely. Others tried to act like nothing had happened, as if silence could reset everything back to normal. I didn't let it. Normal was no longer my goal. Safe was. My child rarely mentions that day now, but I see the change in small ways. They ask before closing doors. They look to me when an adult raises their voice. They need reassurance that rules are not the same thing as punishment. Every time, I remind them gently that discipline is meant to guide, not to scare, that love never involves locking someone away. I remind myself too. What stayed with me the most wasn't my aunt's actions. It was how easily she believed she could erase them, how confident she was that family loyalty would protect her more than the truth ever could protect a child. She was wrong, because this time, there was proof. And this time, I didn't hesitate. I don't regret involving the police. I don't regret saving the footage. I don't regret setting boundaries that made some people uncomfortable. If anything, I regret only one thing: that I ever questioned myself in the first place. If you're listening to this and you're facing something similar, hear this clearly. You are not overreacting for protecting your child. You are not cruel for refusing to stay quiet. And you are not responsible for the consequences of someone else's choices. My aunt called it discipline. The footage called it abuse. The law called it unacceptable. And I called it the moment I chose my child without compromise. That family gathering ended something, but it also began something better. A life where my child is safe. A life where silence is no longer the price of belonging. And a future where no one ever gets to lock my child away and call it love again.